The events in Lake Megantic were gaining momentum in the press. Newspapers took advantage of the story to air their frustrations about the political and social affairs of Quebec. But Donald's concerns were more immediate when he announced to the press,
"I'm looked upon by the world as a murderer, an outlaw, a villain. I realize myself the dreadful ending that may come to this. And for that reason, I keep out of their way. If they crowd me, they do so at their own risk. And I defy them to take me."
This defiance captured the imagination of the reporter Peter Spaniard, known to his readers as Peter Span.
He probably colored things a little bit more. I mean, he was a good reporter, but I think what came first was the story.
It must be stated that the people of the Scotch settlements declare that they have suffered for years and years the greatest injustice at the hands of unscrupulous moneylenders. Till the Morrison outbreak, the hostility of the people did not show itself. They have made his troubles their own, and they do not propose to do anything in the way of settling that affair till they can make such terms with the officers of the law as will assure him a fair trial before a jury of unbiased men.
I think he moved around quite a bit just to avoid being caught. And they used to hide him in their attics or in their barns, or he had friends everywhere.
With a $2,000 reward posted for Donald, his friends set about organizing a network of gatekeepers informally tagged the Morrison Defense League. Their role? To protect and shelter Donald from the police.
So one day my grandmother was, she looked out the window and he was just coming out of the woods. She lived on a farm, and so he came to the door and she invited him in, of course, and she told him to sit down at the table, and she gave him a bowl of stew. And while he was eating, she saw them coming up the road. So she said, "Quick, Donald, get under the table." So she pulled the tablecloth down and spread her long skirt out. She sat down, and when they came in, she was eating his stew. And they asked if he was here or if she had seen Donald, and she denied it, of course. No, she hadn't seen him. Being a good Christian, I don't know how she got that out, but she did.
He actually was sitting around in MacArthur's kitchen one day when the police came, and he picked up his lunch and took it down the cellar steps and sat down on the cellar steps to finish his lunch while they were stomping around upstairs. He was very calm that way.
But Span wanted his story, and his persistence gained him the trust of the community.
Some friends of Morrison told Spaniard to get on a train and get off at Sandy Cove, and said, "You just stay there and a wagon will pick you up."
Megantic, August 7th, 1888. I left the train at the appointed station, where I found a man who conducted me through the woods to an open spot where he left me. And when, after an hour's waiting, I was joined by my guide in a buggy. We started on a 28-mile drive along a road lined on both sides with bush and leading over innumerable hollows or gullies. Being then about 5:30, we drove for another hour. After, we took a side road which brought us to a farmhouse.
And he was in this room, and he didn't know, and he was a little frightened because everybody was armed. I mean, this was just no casual thing. I mean, these people were armed. They had rifles, and there he was in this room wondering what, and Morrison came in.
I saw the modern Rob Roy, the Megantic desperado, or whatever people had chosen to call the slayer of Jack Warren. The very first thing that strikes a stranger is his perfect calmness and unassuming demeanor, entirely different from what one would expect in a man charged with crimes like murder.
While Span scratched out his story, Morrison took the opportunity to state his position.
My heart bleeds whenever I think of the wrongs they have done to me. And besides, I have lost all faith in justice through my bitter experience of days agone. If Macaulay will return the money, I'm ready to leave the country, never to return.
The police had been chasing Donald Morrison now for 3 months. An embarrassed Quebec Premier, Honoré Mercier, summoned his attorney general, insisting that the matter be dealt with. It was costing the government support and votes.
The premier is really pissed off with this because he says, look at here, guys, this is not good for us. We're looking bad. You got one Scotsman running around down there, and nobody's capturing him. Surely somebody can capture him. So that's why it blew into such a big thing. So now you have between 100 to 200 people looking for him, and they wanted anybody, adventurers, bounty hunters. They said, get him, nail him.
By November, reinforcements were brought in. A search party, totaling over 100 men, including the militia, was determined to capture Donald Morrison. The reward now climbed to $3,000.
He went everywhere by snowshoe. And, of course, they track him. But everybody else wore snowshoes. So they'd set tracks. They'd go on a trail here and a trail there, and his trail would be here, and the Scottish people would they'd go out with their snowshoes. So when these people, the militia and the police, were tracking snowshoe tracks all over the place, but they weren't Morrison's, or they may have been Morrison's.
He was a very agreeable fellow. He was good looking, and he was nice to talk to, and he was very casual and very calm. That he actually did go up to the police and try to help them with their investigations.
I mean, he had guts. One day he was on snowshoes, and he was going down this road that was snow all over the place, and he came upon the police. Now, this was winter. It was cold. Everybody was bundled up. And the man in charge of this little group stopped him and said, where are you going? He said, well, I live up here. And they said, well, you're not Donald Morrison. He said, if I were Donald Morrison, would I be standing right here? So this gives you a sense of what he was. I mean, he was very cool. That was sort of typical of the things of the situation, how he got away being so bold about it. I mean, they could have nailed him right there.
Foiled throughout the long winter, many searchers were losing their enthusiasm and their solidarity. Mercier's 3-month chase stretched into an 8-month failure. He needed a new leader for his manhunt. In February 1889, he selected a shrewd strategist, Judge Aimé Dugas of Montreal, to settle this embarrassment.